used to things being a bit different in 2020, and so they are today. Now, if you're watching this podcast on YouTube, you'll see that I'm in that sort of studio. Quick look around. Here we go. The one that we used to use in the old days. And Lizzie's not in the studio. Where are you, Lizzie?
I'm literally in the next door room to you, locked in an office. I mean, I can probably see you from where I'm sitting.
So the studio's of a certain size that we've been told you can't have both of us in it at the same time for social distancing reasons. So even though we're in the office today in the ITV News newsroom for various reasons, we're having to do this podcast with two doors between us.
Yeah, it's so weird, isn't it? But there we go, strange times we live in. Hopefully we'll be back in the studio soon.
The background doesn't look as good as mine, actually.
No, you definitely lucked out with the background.
Grey and boring in that office.
Yeah, it looks like an office, doesn't it? With the
lovely studio and that nice pink and thingy wrap thing. So yeah, we're doing all right in here. So what's the temperature like in there? All the way over there.
It's all right. It's all right.
That's nice. You got enough Wi-Fi signal to keep us going?
No, the Wi-Fi signal's a bit dodgy in here, actually.
Yeah, right. So welcome to the Royal Rota podcast, which is coming at you kind of remotely, kind of not remotely. We're in the studios in London. So hello, welcome back. I hope you've had a good week, whatever you've been doing in this strange world. Probably watching at some point, I'm sure you might have noticed that there was a new president in town in the United States of America. One schlepped off to Florida and another one entered Pennsylvania Avenue. And the Queen sent Joe Biden a message. We know that much. Don't know much else.
Yep, she did. No, we don't know the contents of that message, but yes, she did send him a message ahead of that inauguration yesterday.
And we've been in court this week. When I say in court, we've kind of been zooming into court. What was it on Microsoft Teams, I think, wasn't it, this particular one?
Yeah, virtual 2-day hearing for Meghan's ongoing court case. So yeah, another virtual hearing for that. So yeah, everything back on.
Every time we have one of these court cases, I think they can't tell us anything else. There's always something new, isn't it? There's always a little extra nugget of information or some document they release. Yeah,
and we had a few new nuggets this time that we can take you through.
Yeah. So this is kind of like me doing the Robinson's Royal Rundown.
You're very much encroaching on my thing.
So we've done the Queen, we've done Meghan. Have you got anything else left for your Robinson's Royal Rundown?
I've got a few things left if you're going to leave me anything.
Hold on then.
So actually at the top of my list, you can have a lie down while I do this. At the top of my list, as with everything, we are back on Zoom for royal engagements again, and William carried out 2 calls this week with frontline workers. As you say, Meghan's court case, this is the ongoing case with the Mail on Sunday over the publication of a letter that she wrote to her father that had a 2-day hearing that we sat through virtually. The Queen sent a message to the new president of the United States, Joe Biden, ahead of his inauguration. The Countess of Wessex celebrated her birthday, and there was a video message saying how she celebrated it with some really happy news. And we also heard this week about Harry's heartbreak at the situation with his family.
Right, shall we re-engage? Is your Robinson's Royal Rundown done? Is it wrapped up?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's everything we'll see.
Well, I mean, we could start in many places. I think, though, because it is topical and it is what everyone wants at the moment, is a jab in the arm. And we know, as we discussed last week, the Queen's had a jab in the arm. And so too has the father of Sophie Wessex. He's had the jab in the arm. So gradually we're getting all the old people done, including the Queen.
Including the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh. Yep, we talked about that last week, how they've had their COVID vaccination. And this week, during a video call that Prince William did with various people involved in helping the administrating process for the vaccine, he talked about how proud he was of his grandparents, the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, for getting that vaccine
your NHS will contact you when you need the vaccine. When it's your turn, please come and get it. We do have vaccine hesitancy in some groups, Your Royal Highness. It's really important to kind of really get into communities, ethnically diverse communities, more deprived communities, to say, you know, this is your vaccine as well. It's for everyone. It's not just for some communities. So getting that uptake is really important. And while we're waiting to get everybody vaccinated, the vast majority of the country is vaccinated, to keep following social distancing guidelines, because actually we're not going to suddenly be in a position where we can hug all the people we want to. It's going to take a bit of time. So being able to reinforce those messages are really important.
My grandparents have had the vaccine, and I'm very proud of them for doing that. So it's really important that everyone gets their vaccine when they're told to. So.
And as you saw in that video call, he was speaking to lots of, the army of people that are putting these jabs in arms up and down the country. I mean, the last count, we were, 4.5 million so far. And we'll be moving on, we are already moving from the over 80s, as in brackets, Queen and Duke of Edinburgh, among many others, to the over 70s, which presumably means that Charles and Camilla will be getting there soon.
Yeah, they're both in their 70s, so you'd think that they were in the next list of people to be called up. But what I thought was interesting about the video call that William did was, during that call, some of the medics were talking to him about vaccine hesitancy, and we spoke a lot last week about how the Queen letting it be known that she'd had the vaccination could help instill confidence in the public with getting the jab. And I think it's a real sense that the whole family is working together to really instill confidence in the public.
Yes, and actually that is a big issue. And there was a debate I was watching on the TV last night about just, how in certain communities, in certain cities, the take-up rate on the vaccine is way below what it is in other areas. And some of that is to do with those areas that were more diverse than others. So, yes, you think there is an effort now to get everyone to have it, which is why I suspect that Charles and Camilla will probably tell us when they've had it, because they'll want to chime with the Queen. As ever, where the Queen leads, others will follow, and I rather suspect they will eventually tell us.
Yeah, I think we probably will find out. I mean, we spoke previously about how Prince Charles said that absolutely he would go ahead and have it. Prince William making very positive noises about the vaccination. Sophie talking about how delighted she is that her father's had it. It's a real focus from all of them on how positive this vaccination is, and how it can really change the sorry situation we're in at the moment.
Yeah, the really sorry situation at the moment, isn't it? And, a significant moment, I think, for the world as this vaccine starts to roll out. In fact, I did a presenting shift in the newsroom in the studio the other day, and actually we were running the story about India and how it staggers me about the numbers in India. They've actually got to get through 1.3 billion people, and they're aiming to do 400 million of them by the summer, which is 4 or 5 times the size of the UK, in any case, the entire size of the UK. So that is a massive program going on around the world. The world's attention was also focused on Washington yesterday. Now, we were trying to find out whether the Queen had actually met Joe Biden. We don't think she has. Now, I found a picture of Prince Harry meeting Joe Biden. I think it must have been at one of the Invictus Games, but the Queen hasn't, despite him being Barack Obama's vice president for 2 terms. He hasn't, it would seem, yet met the Queen.
Yeah, we don't think he has. Yeah, as you say, I had a quick look through the photo archives yesterday as well, and there were some photographs of the Bidens with Prince Harry at his Invictus Games. There was a picture of Prince Charles and Camilla with Joe Biden and Barack Obama. But yeah, as you say, I couldn't find anything with the Queen. But she did send him a message yesterday, Wednesday, ahead of his inauguration, but we don't know the contents of that message, although I assume they were congratulatory.
Yes, we shouldn't really let people in about some of the suggestions that were made to us about what could have been in that message, but we will remain politically neutral on this podcast, as you would expect that we should. And I presume if the Queen were ever to meet Joe Biden, it would have to happen in the UK, because the Queen doesn't do any foreign travel anymore. So he would have to be invited here on a state visit of some kind in order for the 2 of them to meet.
Yeah, the Queen hasn't travelled since 2015 when she went to Malta. So yeah, for the two of them to meet, Joe Biden would need to come here. We had, of course, that state visit from Donald Trump in 2019, and the year before that he came over and went for tea at Windsor, didn't he? And there were those pictures of him not quite sure where to walk around the Queen when they were inspecting the guard.
When Donald Trump didn't quite know where to go and walked in front of the Queen, I think, didn't he? From, as my memory serves me well. But anyway.
Yeah, it was all a bit awkward. And then the time that he came over for the state visit, there was the helicopters being flown into onto the lawn of Buckingham Palace in a rather sort of.
Yeah, very well. Yeah.
Yeah, but Joe Biden.
The banquet that they had, and Prince Harry kind of sort of hiding in the background because, you know, it was thought at the time that, again, this is only what was written at the time, that he wasn't overly keen on Mr. Trump, and certainly we know that it doesn't chime well with Meghan's politics. So yeah, it's time for Joe Biden to come. Maybe an invitation's already making its way to the White House in amongst all the other big things that he's doing in his first few days in office.
Yeah, so Joe Biden is the Queen's 14th American president in her reign, in her 68-year reign, and she's met all of them now, bar Biden and one other.
He didn't meet Lyndon Johnson?
Yeah.
Right.
Correct.
Can you name all 14 from 1952 till now?
I scribbled them all down because I knew you were going to ask me that.
It starts with Eisenhower.
Truman, she met Truman when she was still Princess Elizabeth.
Yeah.
She didn't meet him when she was actually Queen. And then Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, and now Joe Biden.
Well done.
I did have it written. I've got used to how you test on these podcasts, so I come armed with information.
Actually, that reminds me, what is Boris Johnson in terms of the Queen's Prime Ministers? Isn't he sort of number 14 or something like that, isn't he? So I should find that out. Go backwards. You'd have to go Johnson, May, Cameron, Brown, Blair, Major, Thatcher, Callaghan, Wilson, Heath, and then it gets a bit hazy in the 60s.
You should be able to do this, given your...
Yeah, Wilson before Heath. Oh dear, I mean, people have been turning off this podcast in droves right now, but we never started with Winston Churchill and then Anthony Eden, Alec Douglas Hume, Harold Macmillan. I think we've probably covered them all now. I'm sure there's 13 in there somewhere, but probably just not quite the right order. Anyhow, we digress. That wasn't the only Zoom call that William made about vaccines this week, though, was it? Because he also spoke to some members of the frontline NHS staff about the impact that it's having on their mental health. And actually, I thought he raised a really valid point in that, you know, the number of deaths that we're tragically seeing at the moment, and let's remind ourselves that this week alone we've hit the highest number of deaths in a 24-hour period twice this week so far, and who knows what they are today and as we go through the week, but just how that affects those on the front line. And he was speaking with some personal experience, wasn't he?
He was, yeah. He said, to quote, it really worries him about the effect on the lives of the emergency responders who are seeing such high levels of sadness, trauma, day in, day out. And he spoke, as you say, with personal experience of his time as an air ambulance pilot. We've heard him touch on those experiences in the past. We were there for one of the speeches he made where he talked about how that impacts on your life and therefore what you take home with you. And he spoke about that again on that call.
Something that I noticed from my brief spell flying, their ambulance with the team, is when you see so much death and so much bereavement, it does impact how you see the world. And it's very interesting what you just said then about being able to kind of see things in a different light and realize, like you said, I think you said about everyone around you dying, you thought everyone was going to die. That is what really worries me about the frontline staff at the moment, is that there is that, you're so under the cosh at the moment, you're so pressurized and you're seeing such high levels of sadness, trauma, death, that it impacts your own life and your own family life, because it's always there, and you're so drawn into it, which everyone is. I mean, it's only natural that would happen. But that's where I think a lot of the public don't understand that when you're surrounded by that level of intense trauma, sadness, and bereavement, it really does. It stays with you at home. It stays with you for weeks on end, doesn't it? And you see the world in a much more slightly depressed, darker, blacker place.
And of course, because of the lockdown, all of these things are happening at the moment online, virtually, just like William's two virtual meetings he had this week with NHS staff. And the other thing that was very virtual this week was when Mr. Justice Warby was sitting at the High Court, and at least I think it's the High Court, unless, of course, he has a living room that looks very much like a courtroom. But the counsel for the Duchess of Sussex and the counsel for the Mail on Sunday were both zooming in or Microsoft Teamsing in from their respective chambers. What we all thought was perhaps typical of our time was how when Meghan's counsel, Justin Rushbrook QC, got up to speak at the beginning, nobody could hear him. And they were going, "You on mute, Mr. Rushbrook? Mr. Rushbrook, you on mute?"
Yeah, if ever there was a court case of the times that we're living in, it was the start of this one.
Once it was established that he wasn't on mute, he worked out his laptop wasn't really connecting well, so he had to go off, scuttle away and find a different laptop.
Yes, but we did finally get underway. So this was
yeah. What did we learn from this latest set of hearings?
So just to set it up, this was a 2-day hearing, and this is an application from Meghan and her legal team for the case against the Mail on Sunday for the publication of this letter that she wrote to her father being published. They're applying for what's called a summary judgment, which would essentially, it's a legal step which concludes the case without it needing to go to full trial. If it goes to full trial, that will happen in the autumn. There was the delay to the case for confidential reasons. If there's a summary judgment, then the judge just rules on the facts in front of him. So this 2-day hearing, the judge heard from both sides and has gone away for at least a couple of weeks to make a decision.
So we were to sum up kind of what was discussed. It was basically Meghan's side saying, look, the weight of evidence is overwhelmingly in our favour. It was a private letter. It was confidential. Thomas Markle gave it to the Mail. The Mail splashed it without even consulting us or telling us that they were doing it. Therefore, that was a breach of Meghan's privacy and copyright and data protection. And therefore, we don't need a court case because it's all, it's pretty obvious that this was a breach. The Mail, on the other hand, was arguing, well, actually, when it comes to copyright, you've already admitted that you had some help with the letter from a palace aide. When it comes to privacy, we allege that you actually wanted this letter out there in the public domain. You'd also, according to the Mail on Sunday's lawyers, told your friends they could speak about it in the People article that came out before it. So this is the kind of argument that was going on in the court over those 2 days about whether or not this whole thing should go to trial in October or not.
Yeah, and I think there were two things we all picked up on over the 2 days, sort of in addition to the arguments. One saying it's intrinsically private, and the other saying that they believe she wrote it with the intention of it being in the public domain. And that was how Thomas Markle and Meghan both viewed this letter, and they viewed it incredibly differently. Meghan's legal team, that she said that she wrote it to him as a message of peace, and Thomas Markle, in his witness statement, said he felt it actually signalled the end of their relationship, and it was not a reconciliation at all.
Yeah, that was one of perhaps the sadder parts, wasn't it, of what we learned. It was just about how deep this rift is between them. And so what we got this week, we were given by the court. The court released a statement that Thomas Markle had made about the whole letter and why he gave it to the Mail on Sunday. And as you say, he pretty much says that he wanted to correct the misrepresentation of Meghan's letter in that People magazine. And he calls her Meg. The tone and the content of the letter Meg had written me in August 2018 was not represented. He even used the word, it was a total lie, what was said about the letter in the People magazine. And I just think, there was Meghan writing, and they released the last line, didn't they, of what Meghan had put in her letter that she said that I ask for nothing other than peace, and I wish the same for you. And her lawyers were very keen to point out that that was an extract from the letter that the Mail on Sunday decided, for whatever reason, not to publish in its original article.
Yeah, and I mean, the other things that Thomas said was that the letter didn't say that she loved me. It didn't ask how I was. It showed no concern about the fact I'd suffered a heart attack, and it asked no questions about my health. And he says that the reason that he went to the Mail on Sunday with the extracts was to sort of to defend himself, to put aside his side of the argument. It was all sort of very one-sided, and he wanted to show how he felt by publishing extracts of the letter. And one of the reasons that the whole thing wasn't published, because it would have made, he feels, Meghan look worse.
Yeah, and actually, just in the way he wrote that the People magazine article, he said made it sound like she looked after me, Thomas Markle, with such incredible generosity. And then he wrote in the statement to the court, that was wrong and unfair. It made it sound as though Meg had been supporting me, which was untrue. I mean, really terrible state of affairs, the situation on a personal level between daughter and father exposed.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone knows just how bad their relationship is. I mean, it's non-existent anymore. And all we're reading at the moment is witness statements. Imagine if this goes to full trial in the autumn, and we've got daughter versus father in the trial. I mean, I think that will be a very sorry state of affairs, really.
Yeah, and you can imagine the intensity of interest that there's going to be in that court case if it were to go to trial in October. But as I say, the decision on that one is still out at the moment. I thought the other thing that we learned this week was a letter from a legal firm acting on behalf of 4 former Palace employees, and we'll run through exactly who they are in a moment, essentially saying, look, they don't want to be involved. They'd rather not take sides in this dispute between your 2 clients. They write, our clients are all strictly neutral, but if it comes to it, they are willing to come to court and give evidence to shed light on some key areas of interest.
Yeah, I think that's key to point out that all 4 of them, they're the so-called Palace 4, that they would remain neutral in this, but they would, if appropriate, the letter says, be willing to give oral evidence at trial and or provide to the parties any relevant documentary evidence. And the letter says that on their analysis of the statements of the case, they believe that one or more of the former members of staff that work for the Sussexes would be in a position to shed some light on the creation of the letter and its electronic draft, whether or not Meghan anticipated that the letter might come into the public domain, and whether or not Meghan directly or indirectly provided information to the authors of Finding Freedom. So that's Omid Scobie and Carolyn Durand.
And those points are crucial, aren't they? Because the Mail have said that Meghan showed drafts of this letter with Jason Knauf, the Kensington Palace press secretary at the time, and therefore does that mean that he owns some of the copyright on this letter, because he obviously had some input in what it said to her father? The Mail then also claim that meant that Meghan kind of had a media strategy. This is their claim, not fact, but this is what they've put to court, and therefore she expected it to come out into the public domain. And then there's a whole thing about Finding Freedom, which we discussed last year, the biography, and whether or not Meghan and Harry had helped them or gave them no help at all. And the 4 members of staff is Samantha Cohen, the former head of the household, effectively the private secretary, Jason Knauf, Sarah Latham and Christian Jones, who are all at various times have been quite senior communications secretaries for Harry and Meghan, both before the split from Kensington Palace and afterwards.
Yeah, and then I say that none of their clients would welcome potential involvement in this litigation. And I mean, I think one of the big talking points, as you say, was around the fact that Meghan had shown this letter to the communications team, that if it was wholly private and, as private as their team are arguing, Meghan's team are arguing, then why on earth was she showing the communications team the contents of the letter?
Yeah, and the answer from Meghan's side is that Jason Knauf was the palace's point man for dealing with Thomas Markle and all the issues that are surrounding it. Anyway, that's gone off with the judge. Mr. Justice Warby will come back at some point in the next couple of weeks and tell you whether or not there's going to be that big court case in the autumn/fall. Wherever you're listening to this, you'll know which season to which I am referring, or whether or not there will be what's called a summary judgment and he'll decide on the facts of the case before him. While we're talking about palace aides, we should probably just say that there's been a couple of big departures announced this week, one being the Communications Secretary to the Prince of Wales and Duchess of Cornwall, a chap called Julian Payne. He's leaving to take another job in the private sector. And Christian Jones, the aforementioned Christian Jones, who we've just said, whose name was mentioned in the court case, and had been the press secretary for William and Kate, is currently the acting private secretary for William and Kate. He's also announced his departure from the royal household.
Yeah, I think, and I think we should say that both Julian and Christian have done a brilliant job over the last year of navigating their principals, so Kate and William and Charles and Camilla, through the pandemic and keeping them relevant and visible during an extraordinary time. They had to all think quite quickly about how they were going to kind of reinvent themselves and keep themselves in the public eye and able to sort of help the causes like they would day in, day out ordinarily. So I think, you know, the teams have done incredibly well to keep their royals so visible.
Most people will say also that they've had quite a lot of success over, you know, the previous years. I mean, yes, William and Kate had a good pandemic, but they were in quite a good place to begin with. Charles and Camilla have, you know, continuing to excuse me. There's obviously something in it. Charles and Camilla are continuing to improve their image. Yes, sorry. The sneeze is. There's no one else in the studio, so but I don't think the droplets are going to reach your room. Two doors along. Let's just tell you about what one of our colleagues, Tom Bradby, has spoken about this week. Now, we should be clear here that he was actually on an ITV chat show with Alan Titchmarsh. You might remember that Earl Spencer, Diana's brother, was on there quite recently. Tom was talking about his new book, but inevitably he was asked by Alan Titchmarsh about Harry and Meghan and their split from the royal family, given Tom's closeness to Prince Harry. This is what Tom told Alan Titchmarsh about all of that.
There's been a huge amount that's happened over the last year that I can't talk about and I don't want to talk about. And an awful lot of what's been said is kind of just not accurate and not right. And that's occasionally frustrating because I'm sitting there kind of biting my fist thinking, well, this is just nonsense. So are they unhappy? No, I think they're content. I think, you know, the things they're doing, I think they're quite excited by. I think he's heartbroken by the situation with his family. I mean, you don't necessarily need to have knowledge to know that, but I think it's true. And
this is the distance between Harry and William.
Well, just, you know, the situation with the family clearly isn't ideal, you know, and it's been a very difficult year for them all. And to some extent, I felt a little bit caught in the middle of them with that documentary, which is a deeply uncomfortable place to be. And that's in a way why I'm always reluctant to say anything more, because I don't want to make anything worse or get in between anything or anything like that.
And that's what Tom said. You know, I know they didn't really want to or enjoy engaging in conversations about Harry and Meghan on that show, but you know, he was asked about it and that's what he said. It made the front page of one or two newspapers the following day that Harry was heartbroken. But I think, as Tom said, you don't need to be an expert or particularly well connected to know that no one's really happy about the family situation following the split of the Sussexes from the rest of the royals.
Yeah, Tom did say, didn't he, that he had a reluctance to talk about it, and how, you know, it potentially puts him in an awkward position, and the papers all picked up on the line about Harry is heartbroken about the situation with his family. But like you say, I don't think you necessarily need to have insider knowledge or be friends with the royals to know that of course they must be heartbroken by the situation, and that it was of course a very difficult year for them all, with the transitions, the Sandringham summit, the Sussexes leaving, how they announced that. I mean, I think it was obvious that it was a difficult year for all of them.
Indeed, and all those stories on Meghan, on Tom, on Harry, on the Queen, on vaccines, on the NHS, all on our website, itv.com/news. And there's a special dedicated Royals page, which we work very hard to maintain and keep up to date as possible. Social media, you know where to find us on Twitter @ChrisShipITV.
And at Lizzie ITV.
And on what's the other thing called? Instagram, that one. At ITV News Royals. Thank you for joining the podcast. As ever, it's always a pleasure to have you with us and to keep whittering away in your ear, whether you're listening to this running or whether you sit down at your PC or your phone or your tablets to watch us on YouTube. We appreciate it. There's lots of podcasts out there that you could choose. If you're listening to ours and you've got this far in, then we're grateful, eternally grateful.
Yeah, and we will see you next week.
Bye-bye.